This is Black Swan Outdoors, and I want to welcome you to the homestead. I thought about going outside today. It's about -10. I thought I'd get ready to go and do a little snowshoeing around the property. And I thought I would take an opportunity to talk about how to prepare for a winter environment and the clothing that you wear. It's probably, I think winter dress is probably a great way to talk about the fundamentals of how to layer and the type of clothing that you can select to keep yourself warm and comfortable in the outdoors. A lot of people are hesitant about getting out of the outdoors because they feel concerned about getting too cold, especially in the winter environments. So we're going to talk about some fundamentals of keeping warm, and then you can take these fundamentals and translate them to pretty much any environment around the country. What we'll do is I'll talk about these fundamentals as I'm getting ready for my hike. Now, in the winter, there's two different types of cold that we want to prepare for. There's a dry cold, and then there's a moist or humid cold. And it really can make a difference in terms of how you stay warm in both the mechanics of the clothing that you're wearing and the fabric that you're choosing. So I think that that's really important to understand right off the bat and how it makes it different specifically to other three-season environments where there's dry heat and humid heat, and the same with the wintertime. So our body basically loses its temperature through 4 different means. There's convective heat loss, so the air blowing across your body, say wind or even water coming across your body, removing that heat. Conductive heat loss, where the heat is going to leave your body from a hot area to a cold area. So you're sitting down on a rock, you're standing on the ground. That heat just naturally moving from the thermodynamics, moving, from a cold area to a warm area to a cold area. Then there's perspiration, and perspiration is a way that your body naturally cools off. So your body produces moisture on the skin evaporates. That in that evaporation, the heat BTUs absorb that heat, and you cool off. And obviously, in a humid environment, it doesn't work very well. So again, it relates, Ben, to the winter environment. That relates as well to the winter environment as well as it does to the summertime. And then lastly is your radiant heat loss. Radiate through radiation. Radiate. So our body, in order to keep it warm, like our hands, let's say, or our core to stay alive as a survival mechanism, what happens is your capillaries and your arteries constrict inside your hands and your feet when your body starts getting colder. And what that does is it starts forcing warmer air around your core, or warmer blood around your core to protect yourself. And so your hands often become colder first than anything else in your body for that reason. So if you warm your core, your hands and your feet are going to start warming up. Now, where this relates to radiant heat loss is that doesn't happen in your brain. You don't want to lose oxygen and obviously blood in your brain, or oxygen through the blood in your brain. So that doesn't happen. So what happens then is your heat just kind of dissipates off of your head like a radiator. Like think of heat loss and think of a radiator. It works the same way. Also, because we're tall and upright in our structure, just the top of our body is going to lose heat, faster. So our shoulders, our neck, and then our head are all components that we want to protect from that radiant heat loss. So what we want to do is we want to take a look at all the different types of clothing options that we have and put that on in specific layers so that we can regulate our temperature from all these different types of heat losses. All right, so when we're looking at clothing, there's 2 different types of clothing we're concerned with. We're concerned with hyperphilic or hyperphobic clothing. Now, hyperphobic clothing means, phobic means it does not like moisture. Philic means it does like moisture. It likes to absorb that moisture, takes that moisture in. So cotton, for example, is an example of that. So in an environment where you have humidity as an issue specifically, and it's colder, you don't want to have any moisture in that clothing. Otherwise, you're going to lose your heat through conductive heat loss as your moisture is collecting in that clothing. So in that cold, moist environment, cold, humid environment, you're going to lose the quality, the ability for your clothing to keep you cold through conductive heat loss from that moisture, even if you don't feel that moisture in the fabric. So the goal here is to keep that moisture moving through and off your body to keep you dry and warm. All right. So knowing that, we're going to start focusing on some natural fibers like silk or wool, and we're going to focus on synthetic fibers such as fleece, polypropylene, polyethylene, polypropylene. Now, 15 years ago, 20 years ago or so, a lot of these fabrics were just coming off the line, were harder to get, they're much more expensive. You could go, if you understand the difference between hyperphilic and hyperphobic clothing, if you understand the difference between these thicknesses that we're going to be talking about in a second and the layers, if you understand about the construction of the clothing, you could go to a Goodwill and get completely outfitted with regular brand clothing, and you could probably be just as successful and just as warm as anyone else, and I'm talking 3-season or 4-season. So you don't have to, money doesn't have to be an object to keep you from enjoying the outdoors. You can find these off-brand stuff. I'm not going to harp too much on brands. If you're buying a more expensive brand clothing, in my opinion, from my experience, is that the advantages from one brand to another is pretty minor. What you're going to get when you buy a more expensive article of clothing is a more robust clothing that's going to last forever. Buy once, cry once, I think is the phrase. So a lot of the clothing that I have that I'm going to be putting on today is stuff that could be 10, even some stuff that's 20 years old, and it works and services me quite well. In all of my experiences of canoeing, rock climbing, ice climbing, snowshoeing, cross-country skiing, all the things that I do on the outdoors, I have kind of honed down specific clothing items that I like and have serviced me well over the course of years. All right, so let's get into it. Every layer of clothing you're going to have is going to start with a base layer, a wicking layer, basically. So it's going to be pulling that moisture off your body. An insulating layer of some kind, so it's going to help you protect you from conductive heat loss. And then an outer layer, or a shell layer, which is going to help you from that convective heat loss primarily, but also from getting wet, say from rain or like a hail or whatever, perspiration. All right, so we're going to use a combination of all these, and we're going to use a combination of different thicknesses of all these. So every piece of clothing you could say is a lightweight, midweight, heavyweight. And that goes for your base layer, that goes for your mid layer, and I would argue also for your shell layer too. You can have some shell layers that are lightweight, very light, maybe more prone to rip and tearing, to mid layer, to a very heavyweight that might serve more from a protective standpoint than it does from purely as a shell layer. Okay, so let's talk base layer first. So again, we want something that's silk or poly that's going to pull that moisture off. We don't want cotton. So a lot of times I see some people get cotton long underwear, and that is fine if you're in a dry, cold environment where you're not perspiring a lot. So if you're just sitting around, like say in a cabin, you're not doing anything, it does offer a layer, but what we're trying to do here is we're trying to pull the moisture off your body, and that's not what it's doing. That hyperphilic layer is going to be taking in that moisture and holding on to that moisture. So it's really important to make sure that you have something that's synthetic. Now, silk long underwear is often very thin and goes into silk weight or lightweight category. And just because it is a lightweight category doesn't mean that you're going to stay any more warmer. What it means is that it's going to limit your ability to layer on more layers. So what I mean by that is I have a midweight fleece on, or base layer on, I could go with a lighter weight, like a silker weight, and then a lightweight layer. And if I wear these two layers, it's going to give me the same amount of warmth as this, but with a heck of a lot more flexibility. And the advantage in that is that I can bridge 3 seasons easily with these 2 layers, or all 4 seasons easily with these 2 layers than I can with one single layer. However, if I have 2 layers on and there's a lot of moisture, then that moisture is going to make me colder, and I'm going to be better off with a single thicker layer in that case, especially a layer that has the ability to zip and I can regulate. So there are some advantages to this. And when I go with the 2-layer system, it's generally going to be a drier, colder environment. And it's also going to be kind of more, what I would say is more your introductory layer. If you want to starting out with putting together a wardrobe, I would go with this as an option because it gives you that flexibility, taking that layer on and off. Sometimes it's just inconvenient when you're in motion to stop, take off your layers. And that's one of the things that I see a lot of people really struggle with on the trail, is understanding when to take off their layers and being maybe bashful about that. So definitely I like the 2-layer option. If you go with that 2-layer option, go with the silk weight. White in color does great in moving that lightweight does a great job in moving that moisture off your skin very quickly, very fast. White as a color is advantageous because it works great if you're, say, want some sun protection in the summer. You're canoeing on a lake and there's a lot of sun and you don't, maybe you have sunscreen on, or you want just a layer to protect yourself. This is a fantastic option. Or maybe you're on, a very warm glacier. So it might be cold, but the sun is so intense, it's warm. You can take off your layers and still have kind of that base layer, and that's nice. Now, let's say you want then in a mid layer, I would go with something black or dark in color. So for that lightweight fleece, base layer, go with something dark. So that combination of color and weight is going to give you a lot of flexibility, and I like that. So one thing that I do is I always keep this base layer in my pack in all seasons, so that I always have a dry base layer. This is lightweight, doesn't take up much space, and I can just be just as much warm with my shell and a new base layer as I would if I fell in the water and I was super wet. I could put on a dry base layer and my shell and be pretty warm, because it's going to protect me from conductive heat loss and convective heat loss. Okay, so that's your base layer. Next layer is going to be an insulating layer. Now, if I was in a really active environment, or I'm going to do something really active, I might forego this next layer. But it's very cold outside, and I'm going to say I'm in moderate activity, as I'm not going to be snowshoeing very far. So in that case, what I'm going to is the next pair layer of fleece, and fleece is designed to breathe. So if I was to put on fleece just as a jacket or the pants, I'm going to feel the air blowing right through that. And a lot of times people that are new to outdoor clothing get dismayed by that, because they feel that it should keep them warmer. But what they're not understanding is that it's working in conjunction with the system. So the air, that convective heat loss, is stopped with that shell layer, or more insulating layers. So this base layer here would be fine. If I wanted to go cross-country skiing, for example, I could put on this, it's a 100-weight fleece, or a mid-weight fleece, and then put on my shells, and I'd be totally fine. Or if I wanted to just go with my base layer too, I could do that and be totally fine. Again, as long as my core is warm, my legs and my feet are going to be warm as well. So the nice thing about the use of a 100-weight fleece pant too is that it goes 4 seasons. If you go into backpacking, say in the fall, it's nice at night to put on something that might give you a little bit more warmth. So this is a good 4-season clothing option, just like we talked about those other base layers. All right, so next up is a sweater layer. All right, this is I'm going to put on a wool sweater or a fleece, and again, I could forgo those bottoms and just go with the top if I wanted to, depending on the environment I'm in. So now I have 2 layers. I have my base layer and I have my insulating layer. All right. In the environment that I'm going to be in, as I said, I'm going to be in moderate activities. So I'm going to want to put on another layer over, and that's going to be a thicker fleece jacket. And if you're just starting out with your wardrobe, I definitely recommend getting a thicker fleece jacket first, and then going for something a little lighter. And so again, I have multiple layers, and mechanically I can unzip and all of these 3 layers and expose my core so that it can cool off and I don't perspire as much. Or I can zip it all up and protect myself quite nicely. All right. Next up is a shell layer. And a shell layer is going to protect me from rain, sleet, snow, but also from that moisture, but also from the moisture from inside. It's going to allow that heat to come off. So I'm going to opt, in this regard, to go with the Gore-Tex fabric. And the Gore-Tex fabric, if I was to take my hot coffee and put it over here, the steam in that coffee is going to rise up out of the fabric, and it's going to, and let that breathe. Or I could take this coffee and pour it on the fabric, and it won't get my hand wet. So that's the advantage of Gore-Tex. You could use a coated nylon, but you're not going to get that same level of breathability. But that would be a good layer. I suggest a single layer, lightweight shell first, because you can use that in all 4 seasons. Alternatively, you can go with a 2-layer or a heavier weight jacket. Such as this. This is an anorak, and what I want is I want it to be breathable. I want it to be Gore-Tex, but I also want it to be breathable mechanically through pit zips, very important. Some have a back panel that can open, and then I want to make sure I have a generous zipper in here so that I can regulate my temperature. Pants are going to be the same. In the winter, I go with a heavier weight ski pant. It's going to be 2 layers. And then the advantage to that then is it's going to be a little less expensive for replacement value, heavier weight, and so it's going to protect me if I'm skiing or whatever. Cross-country skiing, downhill skiing, whatever. I could go with also a more specialized parka, which I didn't grab here, with like some more ski parka that's going to be designed more specifically to the activity of skiing. So if I was cross-country skiing, I might go with a 100-weight fleece here and just go with another lighter sweater, essentially. All right. So I'll put my shell layer on. My convective heat loss. All right. Next is our feet. Let's talk about feet real quick. So we have plenty of options for socks. My go-to sock, my basic sock from all environment that I'm gonna stick with, is a mid-weight merino wool fleece, and I like smart wool, but you can find any of these blended merino wool socks. They all work fine. The reason why I like smart wool is they last forever, and it just works well. The reason why I want a mid-weight is it's a compromise between breathability and cushion. So there's the 3 weights as you can have is a lightweight base wicking sock, a lightweight hiking sock, mid-weight, or expedition weight or heavyweight. So a lot of times people like to go with a thicker sock, especially when it's colder. And I say that depends. That's going to depend on the boot that you're wearing and the environment that you're in and the activity that you're doing. I'm going for a moderate hike, so therefore, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go with a sock that's going to be lighter. The more active you are, the lighter that sock you want it to be. So a lot of times in the summer, people go with thicker socks for the extra cushion while they're hiking. And with modern technology and shoes these days, you don't need that extra cushion. You can perspire up to 4 quarts a day out of your feet alone of water. So it's really important to keep your feet dry on the inside and the outside, just like we talked about our body. Do you need a liner sock? Yes or no? I think that's going to depend. The Polypro merino wool mix does a very good job of moving the moisture and wicking. So to me, I go with less. If I'm wearing a pack, if I'm going to wear a big pack, if I'm backpacking, snowshoeing, then I'm definitely going to be wearing a liner sock. And this goes whether I'm backpacking in the winter or in the summer. Alternatively, I could go with 2 socks on here for a little extra warmth, and then bring an expedition weight sock in my pack with me, or stick them in my pockets even. And if my feet do get cold, I have an alternative pair of socks to wear. So again, you have a base layer, a mid layer, and then that shell layer, which is the boot itself. So let's talk boots. I think if you're just starting out, you know, a regular pair of Gore-Tex lined hiking boots are going to be fine. They're going to have good treads. They're going to have good breathability. And to be honest, for my first few years of snowshoeing, you know, the disadvantage to something like this is if you're going overnight, you take your boots off at night and you don't put them in your sleeping bag, you'll wake up and they'll be completely frozen. And it's okay, you just put your feet in there and you warm them up, and over the course of an hour or so, they're nice and toasty. It's an inconvenience, and in an extreme environment, it could be potentially very dangerous, so you don't want to do that. So if you want something more specialized to the outdoors, I suggest some kind of like a duck boot, like LL Bean, for example. This is a specialized boot that has 2 layers. So I have an outer layer, protect from convective heat loss and moisture, and then a liner that you can pull out as well. So I can dry this a lot faster. I can bring the liner in the tent with me and leave the boot outside. So there's a lot of different options for boots in winter, but you want to think about how your feet are going to be breathing. So too much neoprene, too much rubber can inhibit the ability for your feet to breathe, therefore making it colder if you're doing something active. A lot of boots that are like at farm stores are designed for farm use, where you're not doing a whole lot of work, but you need to keep, you know, your feet warm. So more specialized winter boots are harder to find and more expensive. So start with your 4-season boots and then go to your 3-season. So, all right, hands. Hands are just the same. You want to go with if you can go with a liner, they're super nice to have a liner. And then a insulating layer. And then your shell layer. So the shell layer is going to keep you dry, keep your hands dry from wet snow, wet environment. Also keep the wind from blowing into snow blowing into your cuff. So you want it fairly generous. You want to make sure that you have some kind of strings on here so that you can pull them off. And what I do is I like to wear the Windstopper fleece primarily, and then put these on when it's really cold. And then these will come, a shell glove, mitten will come with an inner layer of insulating layer. Now, mittens are always going to be warmer than gloves, but you lose the dexterity. So it's a compromise between the two. Now, if it's a humid, cold environment, I'm not going to wear this. I'm not going to wear the liner, because I want to make sure that my hands breathe right through as best they can through these gloves. And remember, these are Windstopper. Now, Windstopper is a great alternative to a shell and a second layer, so you can kind of cut down on the extra layers. If you know the environment you're going to be in and the activity level that you're going to be at is going to be fairly consistent, it's a great way to kind of minimize the bulky extraness of a shell layer, especially in the winter that's dry and you're not going to be exposed to a lot of perspiration. Okay, so we haven't talked about radiant heat loss yet. First up with radiant heat loss is a neck gaiter. Neck gaiters are worth their weight in gold, I think, and it makes a big difference. And it's a lot less bulkier than a scarf. Instead of just a straight neck gaiter, I go for a stretchy balaclava. And I take the balaclava and I bring the back down and I wear it as a gaiter. And then for my hat, I go with a wool stocking cap. I like wool for stocking caps personally, but you can go with polypro all the same. Now what I have is a very functional system. If I'm really cold, I can wear the balaclava with the hat. Let's say I'm in an environment where I'm not moving a lot and I need to stay cold, I need to stay warm. And if I'm moving a lot and I'm perspiring, I'll just wear my hat. And the hat then will breathe through. If it gets wet, I'm still going to stay warm. But I'm not going to be so wet that it's at the end of the day that my hat is going to be completely soaked, because I have this system that's going to protect my ears, my neck, my up down to my shoulders with the balaclava, and my face. So I have this kind of option that I can go with kind of two things. So that's why I like neck. Otherwise, you could just go stick with a regular neck gaiter. Another alternative would be just a merino wool neck gaiter, and they come of different thicknesses. This is a good 3-season one, and it's a good alternative than carrying a bandana as well. Although I always used to carry 2 bandanas. Now I just carry 1 neck gaiter and 1 bandana all seasons. So, okay. Now, bonus material. Let's say you are not going to be very active. You've been hiking all day, you're getting to camp, you need some additional types of clothing. So the first thing I'm going to go with is a fleece jacket. Or, I'm sorry, a down jacket. Now you have the option between down and synthetic. Synthetic is a little heavier for its weight, or for its warmth. So this is going to be much warmer for its weight than it will with synthetic. It's going to be twice the price, but it's also going to last a lot longer. So if the synthetic jacket like this might last 5-6 years maybe, take good care of it, maybe a little longer. But a down jacket is going to last 10, maybe 20 years. So 600 fill jacket is what you want to shoot for if you can. And I want to be able to have it big enough that it goes over all of my layers. So if I'm hiking or I'm skiing and I stop, I want to be able to put this on over all of my layers, not take off my other layers. I want to be able to regulate my temperature by throwing this on everything. All right. Now let's say if it's really cold, or I go to my camp and I'm not moving around a whole lot, then at that point I'm going to go with a pair of insulated pants. I like synthetic pants for this, but you can go with down. They're a little more expensive. But just to throw on a pair of insulated pants, and again, you can have this so they go over your shell layer, or you can take your shell layers off and put these on. But they're going to give you that extra warmth that you need when you're just cooking, or you finished, digging in your site, and you got your tent up, and you just get a little bit of a chill. You can throw these on, and you're super warm. One thing I do recommend is full leg zips with these, so that you can put them on over your boots. And that's really important, and of course regulate your temperature. All right, now auxiliary items. If I'm hiking in a wilderness environment, or I'm gonna be overnight, I have an overnight bag of accessories. I have a second hat, very important. So if your hat gets wet, you can take your hat off and you have a dry hat at the end of the day. I have my night socks. Oh, and by the way, the insulating, or the synthetic pants, you can get away with a heavyweight fleece pant and just put that on underneath your shell. and you'll be totally fine just like a synthetic pants. So as a cheaper alternative, just a simple heavyweight fleece. You can get them Walmart or wherever. All right, so I have for an extra hat for at night, the same as I have my camp socks. So I take my socks off, I put on my camp socks. These are always going to be dry socks. So I have a backup set of socks for whenever, if I ever need it, but I also have a night's pair of socks with carrying the extras. And then I have my mittens. If my gloves get wet, I have alternative mittens, so I always have a backup. Now, when I'm wearing these mittens, I'm almost always wearing then the liner gloves. So I have that base layer, the insulating layer, and then the shell layer on there. So I think that's really important. And then as an alternative to an extra pair of socks for camp, then I also have a pair of down booties, which are super warm. This is luxury camping when you get to that point. I think you can get away with another expedition weight pair of socks that's a lot cheaper, but having a pair of nice down booties is important. Why this is important, having this warm clothes when you're in your tent, the dry clothes, is when you're winter camping, and I think this kind of, people don't realize this, you're in your tent a lot longer because it's getting dark quicker. You have a lot less daylight. So you're spending a lot more time in your tent, which means you're spending a lot of time not doing anything. So, which means you want to be nice and comfy and warm. So, okay, so we've talked about all the different layers. The last thing I'll say is sun. Sun is really important. It's not really a clothing layer, but a lot of times people forget about that. So you want to have sun protection just like you would if you're backpacking during the regular seasons. So you want chapstick with you. You want sunscreen with you. Even though you're covered, you still want to be able to cover sunscreen, especially in your face and your nose. And then you want sunglasses. You have a couple different options. I like these. These are great for skiing. They're great for snowshoeing. They're great for glacier travel. They're also great for water travel. And why this is important is that the way that these are constructed, these glasses, that the snow is going to bounce light back from below. So if you're wearing a regular pair of glasses that are what are called glacier glasses, it's not going to protect you from the glare coming from below. So you want to make sure that your eyes are protected, especially if you're in that environment for a long period of time. So if you're canoeing on big water, or you're on a snow-covered lake, you want to make sure that you're protecting your eyes completely. And then you also want to have some side shields as well. Alternative to this would be to go with the Inuit method of a covering over your eyes with a little slit that's covered, and that's going to help protect your eyes as well. But it's very important to protect your eyes from that sun, especially in those high exposure areas. It was a lot of information on this, but hopefully I covered everything. I'm trying to think if I missed anything at all. I'm going to do another series here on 3 season, so your summer, spring, and fall in clothing, and then we'll talk about the 10 essentials and packing your bag. Stay tuned.